We welcome you back to this channel. Today, we'll hear 3 haunted hotel tales where 2 friends encounter a terrifying entity. A young man stays in an old hotel and is tormented, and a spirit seeking justice calls for a guest's help. Go ahead, turn off the lights, and let's take one more step into the world of the unknown.
The Vanished.
When my friend David and I decided to take a vacation, we never imagined that we would end up in a hotel like The Refuge. It was known for the mysterious disappearance of a guest decades ago. Upon arrival, the building had a gloomy appearance, with its gothic architecture and facade covered in ivy. The lobby was decorated with antique furniture and wrought iron chandeliers that seemed to whisper forgotten stories. The receptionist, a man with an inscrutable expression, handed us the key to our room, 313. David asked the receptionist if the rumors about the hotel were true. He told us that there were many stories, but we should be calm, as nothing had happened in the room he gave us. Upon opening the door, we were greeted by a spacious room, with dark wooden furniture and 2 beds that seemed more like relics from another era than modern pieces of furniture. The walls were adorned with paintings of somber landscapes. That night, after exploring the hotel and having dinner in its restaurant, we returned to the room. I felt uneasy, as if something invisible was watching us. I decided not to mention it, thinking it was just my imagination. Around midnight, we went to bed. The rain pounded against the windows with an almost supernatural force. I had trouble sleeping. I heard noises, like distant whispers, but I attributed them to the old ventilation system. A loud sound woke me. It was like a prolonged moan. I sat up in bed and looked at David, who was sleeping soundly. Then, I saw it. A figure was slowly gliding across the room. It was tall and thin, with elongated limbs covered by a hood that hid its face. Its skin was a sickly white, almost translucent, with long, deformed fingers. The whispers grew more intense. The figure stopped at the foot of my bed, and an icy chill ran through my body. The entity raised its pale hand, pointing at me. I felt a primal terror, as if I were facing something that should not exist. David woke up at that moment, and upon seeing the figure, let out a scream that broke the silence. The entity vanished into the air, leaving behind an echo of whispers. We were both petrified, not knowing what to do. At dawn, we debated whether we should leave the hotel. David insisted that what we had seen wasn't real, that we were probably influenced by the story of the place and our own imagination. Reluctantly, I agreed to stay one more day. We tried to keep ourselves busy, exploring the city and avoiding the hotel as much as we could. But the feeling of being watched never left us. That night, the atmosphere was even more charged. At midnight, the whispers returned, louder and clearer than before. I heard them all around me, as if dozens of voices were speaking in unison, not letting me understand a single word. Then, the figure appeared again. This time, its presence was even more terrifying. I could see more clearly the details of its face, or rather the absence of one. Under the hood, where the eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was only a deep, empty shadow. Its hands seemed longer, almost claw-like, and a cold air surrounded it, making the environment unbearably cold. David, trying to stay calm, began to hyperventilate. The figure moved toward David, who struggled to maintain his composure. The whispers grew louder, turning into a chorus of wails. Terror completely consumed me, and in a last act of desperation, I managed to scream. Suddenly, the entity turned toward me, extending a bony hand. At that moment, David and I screamed in unison, and with that scream, the figure vanished, leaving behind an absolute silence. Morning came, and we didn't need to discuss it further. We left the hotel with the first light of day, feeling an indescribable relief as we left that place. As we descended to the lobby, the receptionist looked at us with a mixture of compassion and resignation. He casually told us that the missing guest never left. It is said that his spirit still roams the hallways. Many have seen him, but few speak of it. We We left the hotel with a sense of relief and lingering terror. The experience left an indelible mark on our minds. Sometimes I can still hear those whispers, reminding me that there are things that should not be disturbed.
The second floor room.
My name is Richard, and what I'm about to tell you is the most terrifying experience I've ever had. My vacation was approaching, and I found an offer for an old hotel in a remote town. The deal was so good that I couldn't resist, so I booked a room without a second thought. I arrived at the hotel in the afternoon, just as the sun was starting to set. From the outside, the building looked like it was from another era, with its Victorian architecture. There was an air of faded majesty, as if time and neglect had left their mark. As I entered, the atmosphere was gloomy, with high ceilings and small windows, so not much natural light came in, and the lighting was dim. I approached the reception to pick up the key to my room, which was on the second floor. The elevator was one of those old ones with a noisy iron gate. I rode it up to the second floor and walked down a long, dimly lit hallway. A chill ran down my spine as I reached my room, and the door creaked as it opened. The interior was cozy, with dark wooden furniture and a large, full-length mirror on one of the walls. That night after dinner, I retired to my room to rest. I lay down on the bed, and without realizing it, fell asleep. I suddenly woke up in the darkness, feeling a tightness in my chest. I had the sensation that someone was watching me. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was just my imagination. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper that seemed to come from everywhere. I reached for the bedside lamp, but it wouldn't turn on. In the dim light, my gaze was drawn to the mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure behind me. Fear gripped me, and I felt my heart pounding. I decided I couldn't stay in the dark, so I got up to open the curtains and let in the moonlight. That's when I saw it clearly. A spectral figure, tall and thin, with empty eyes and a macabre smile, reflected in the mirror. The figure wasn't behind me. It was inside the mirror. I backed away in horror, unable to take my eyes off the mirror. The figure began to move, approaching the surface of the mirror as if trying to break through. I felt an icy chill in the room, and the whisper grew louder, echoing in my ears with disturbing clarity. I struggled to comprehend what was happening. I remembered ghost stories I'd heard as a child, but nothing compared to the terror I felt at that moment. The figure raised a skeletal hand and pressed it against the glass. I could see fog forming on the mirror's surface as if the figure was breathing. Not knowing what else to do, I ran to the door and flung it open, rushing out into the hallway. I looked both ways and saw the door to the room next to mine slightly ajar. I ran toward it, hoping to find help. Inside, an elderly woman was sitting in a chair, looking at me with an expression I can't describe. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. The old woman stood up and approached me. She reached out as if trying to touch me. I screamed loudly and ran without looking back. I reached the lobby and found the receptionist. I told her what had happened, and she told me a terrifying story. A few years ago, an elderly mother and her son, a young man with psychological problems, had stayed in the room next to mine. Once they checked in, they never left the room. When they went to look for them, there was no trace of them. They only found evidence of some kind of pagan ritual. Since then, strange things had started happening throughout the second floor. She apologized for giving me a room on that floor. They usually don't do that, but the hotel was full. She told me the staff would retrieve my belongings, and I could move to the third floor, where a room had just become available. She handed me my new key and I went up to the third floor. Everything seemed normal, but I still didn't feel at ease. Despite that, I managed to sleep through the rest of the night without incident, and the next day, I left the hotel as quickly as I could. I don't know if it was truly a mistake to give me a room on that floor or not. All I know is that I will never return to that place. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see the shadow in that mirror, reminding me that there are things in this world that we will never understand.
The Lady of the Castle.
A few months ago, during a vacation that I thought would be a much-needed break, I experienced something terrifying that changed my life forever. I decided to take a week off at a rural hotel that a friend had recommended to me. It was a place that used to be a medieval castle and had been transformed into a cozy and picturesque retreat. From the first time I saw pictures of the site, I fell in love with its architecture and mysterious air. It was surrounded by a dense forest and perched on top of a hill. I checked into the hotel on a cloudy afternoon, and from the moment I walked in, I felt a sense of unease. The hotel staff was friendly and helpful, and my room, though decorated in an old-fashioned style, was comfortable and had an impressive view of the forest. However, there was something in the atmosphere that wouldn't let me fully relax. The first night passed without incident, but the next day, while exploring the castle grounds, I met an elderly man who worked as a gardener. I approached him to chat, and when I mentioned my interest in the history of the place, he was open to talking. He told me that the castle had belonged to a noble family in the 17th century and was said to be cursed. It was rumored that the wife of the castle's owner had been murdered in one of the rooms. Since then, her spirit has not found peace. He spoke in a very low voice, as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. That night, as I was trying to sleep, I woke up feeling a presence in the room. I opened my eyes and saw a woman standing at the foot of my bed. She had a pale face, sunken eyes, was wearing a long dress that was dirty, and her expression was filled with anger. I wanted to scream, but terror paralyzed me. The figure stared at me for what felt like an eternity, then disappeared without a trace. The following days were torture. Every night, the woman appeared in my room. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with those furious eyes and that expression of deep pain. I tried changing rooms, but it was in vain. Her presence followed me wherever I went. I decided to investigate further into the castle's history. I spoke with other employees, looked through old books and photos in the hotel library, and discovered that the woman's name was Claire, and her death had never been resolved. Some said she was murdered by her husband in a fit of jealousy, while others believed she was the victim of a scorned lover. One night, after an exhausting day, I fell asleep without realizing it. I woke up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone was calling me. I opened my eyes and saw her again, but this time she was closer. I could see the anger in her eyes. Fear consumed me, and her gaze seemed to plead for help. In a faint voice, I asked, "What can I do for you?" After hearing my words, she simply vanished. From that night on, I felt it was my duty to do something to help her find peace. Finally, I approached the hotel staff, asking if they knew how I could help her. While many were evasive, a young employee named Mary offered her help. Mary and I went to the nearby town to investigate, hoping to find someone who knew the story of the lady in the castle. We found an elderly woman who knew the story through an ancestor who had worked there. Claire had suffered from the abuses and jealousy of her husband and had planned to escape from him. But a day before she could flee, her lifeless body was found. We decided to follow the advice of the elderly woman. We performed a small ritual at the place where the body was found, lit some candles, and said a prayer, asking for Claire's peace and rest. It was my last night at the hotel. I woke up once more feeling Claire's presence, but this time, something had changed. Instead of anger, there was a kind of gratitude in her eyes. She looked at me, and although she didn't say anything, I could see a sense of peace in her. A few seconds later, she disappeared. I left the hotel the next day, hoping that Claire had finally found the peace she had been seeking. The memory of those days still haunts me. I know I did the right thing, but I can't help feeling a mix of fear and relief, knowing that even in death, there are those who seek justice.
Thank you for journeying with us through the dark passages of these stories. If you enjoyed them, give us a like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more tales of terror. Until next time, where fear will once again be your companion.